Hi, my name is Rio Daims. I'm from Brattleboro, Vermont, and I am a climate activist.
Hi, my name is Maia McNeill. I'm also from Brattleboro, Vermont, and I work with Rio in climate activism.
We're here today to talk about our most recent efforts with the town declaring a climate emergency, and why we got into this kind of activism and what inspires us to do this work.
I first got started in climate activism when I just kind of got fed up with seeing so much waste around me and so much destruction happening and not really seeing much happening. I think for a while I was kind of passive about it and I tried to be apathetic, but it's definitely really hard when it's all over the news and all you can hear about is how our climate is dying. So, yeah.
I started to get more involved in it when it was actually my dad who started the organization Brattleboro Common Sense asked me to start working on one of their most recent projects called Common Sense Conservation with them, and I got more involved in it, and that led me to being very passionate about these climate-related actions specifically in terms of activism. And now I've been working more with Brattleboro Common Sense and on my own doing different little actions and working on legislation in the town.
So recently what we've been working on is the Declaration of Climate Emergency that we're hoping that the town will adopt. It has a list of goals that we'd like the town to accomplish that are pretty vague. For example, it's basically just asking the town to declare war on climate change based on Senator Bernie Sanders' words. He said that we must look at climate change as if it were a devastating military attack against the United States and the entire planet. And so it asks the town to respond to it as if it was in war, using techniques such as conservation. And it's open-ended so that the town can have a little bit of leeway for how it uses it. But recently we've gone to the select board hoping that they would be able to ratify it and adopt it.
And the declaration also includes a few more specific demands of the town, such as zero emissions across all sectors of the economy by 2030. That is one of the goals. As many people have probably heard, it was in a report this past November that we have, as of now, 11 years to act against climate change before we have irreversible damage caused to this planet. And so that's why 2030 is in 11 years, so we have just that amount of time to make zero emissions in this town and try to do our part in acting against the climate crisis.
Also another part of it is asking that the select board has hearings for people who propose remedies for the climate crisis, and by announcing a declaration of climate emergency, we can use emergency ordinances so that when somebody brings up a proposal, they can try it for a month, and then after that month, if they don't like it, they can get rid of it, and in that way we'll start moving forward faster and become less afraid of new ideas. So part of the reason why that's important is because we recently went to a meeting in which we had a success that Rio can talk about after, but we also had a little bit of a problem because the meeting ran out of time, and for that reason we really weren't given the right respect or response needed to actually talk or engage effectively with the select board. So that was very disappointing. We only had about 15-20 minutes to talk about this super huge thing. It also just emphasizes the need for more staff which is part of the reason why people really wanted to select the sustainability coordinator. Because right now a lot of pressure is being put on very few people, and so that's why the town needs to start focusing on things like climate emergency and devoting resources to that. Yeah.
So recently, the select board did vote to hire a sustainability coordinator position in this town, and that's what we were hoping to kind of incorporate in with this emergency declaration, is have a sustainability coordinator but also bring in members of the town to help the sustainability coordinator in making those steps to have a sustainable town and a town that includes zero emissions. And that's why having the select board warn hearings of the people is very helpful, because it incorporates just our regular citizens in with the government in order to help the sustainability coordinator and help the select board make those changes that are necessary in order to act against climate change.
So actually, there was a lot of people from the town there to support the sustainability coordinator cause, and we heard so many people come up and say why we needed them, but by the time it came for us to actually talk about the declaration of climate emergency, many of the people who had actually supported the declaration had to leave because it was so late. It was nearing 10 o'clock after starting at maybe 6:15. And it just emphasizes how in times of emergency, the way that town government is currently working and the way it's currently treating the problem, it can be very ineffective because they run out of time, they run out of resources, they don't have like the mental capacity to keep on debating with people for 4 hours. Yeah.
That's why also having hearings of the people is very helpful, because it sets aside a time that's specifically meant for talking about the climate emergency, instead of rationing small portions of the select board meetings for the climate emergency, which is very ironic because this is talking about a declaration of climate emergency, yet we were given 10 or 15 minutes to discuss it, and then we had to postpone the vote on the climate emergency declaration to the next select board meeting. So the next select board meeting, September 3rd at the municipal building at 6:15 p.m. Is when it starts. And they will be voting on the declaration of climate emergency, and we hope you will show up and show your support for the declaration. You can find the wording of the declaration on brattleborocommonssense.org. It is posted online there. And hopefully this upcoming meeting, the declaration will be given its due process and its due time to be discussed to a full degree, as it was not last time. We see that coming up in the future, and we really hope that you show your support for the declaration.
So now tell me, what do you think about biomass?
I'm not positive. I haven't really looked into that very much about biomass. I do know that when trees decompose, they emit oxygen. They emit carbon, which they have been holding for years and years, and that is part of the reason that climate crisis is happening from deforestation, because as trees decompose, they let go of all the carbon that they've been storing over the years. So that could be a problematic aspect of using wood for heating, but also it's most likely better than propane.
I think that's also part of the problem. When we went to the select board meeting, they had a long section where they sort of brought in people that have been working on sustainability issues within the town, and they had them talk about all of the projects they completed, and then they went on to say, well, look, we're so much better than the other towns. And I think what we really need to stop having this mentality of we're doing better than before, and even though biomass might be better than propane and it might be better than oil, there are better options out there that can last for longer and not get rid of the trees, that can save our environment. And so,
Such as wind or solar
wind
energy.
or solar. We have so many more options, and I think we really need to start thinking more about where we need to be rather than where we are compared to other people.
Yes.
So that's been very frustrating. Even though it is nice that the town is taking steps like that, I think they need to strive for more, which is why we need a declaration of climate emergency.
Yeah, I think definitely that our town has been using our position in comparison with other towns as an excuse for not taking the extra steps forward, which is not an acceptable thing, especially in the situation that the world is facing right now.
Can I hear your thoughts about electrical cars?
My opinion is that it's just the creation of more, and that uses a lot of carbon, it uses a lot of energy to make cars, and I think instead of making more cars that might be better and emitting so much carbon because we're making those cars, we should stop driving so much and think about riding bikes more and walking more and using public transportation more instead of just creating more mass-produced things like cars.
And the expansion of public transportation within Brattleboro is something that we absolutely need. We have a huge homeless population. We have a huge population of people that are living within poverty. And so as a town under those situations, we should definitely have better public transportation that's cheaper and more available rather than the stuff that we have, as nice as it is to have that stuff.
And public transportation for anyone and everyone. It's not just for people living in poverty. It should be for everyone. People should think of it as an option instead of using their own private transportation methods, because those buses are already going. It saves you some gas. It saves you some electricity.
What would you say that is important steps to make people use more public transportation?
Make it more accessible.
Also though, I think sometimes making changes within the town to support climate or sustainability reminds me of the changes that we made during world wars, or like after the Great Depression, where we actually had the government get more involved in people's lives. And I think making incentives for people to use public transportation or bike more, and maybe making changes that might be considered extreme now, but later on we might just accept it as normal, is super important. And by doing things like rationing oil, we can definitely encourage people to take public transportation and become more aware of their own personal effect.
Do you think a tax on oil?
I don't actually know if the town is a carbon tax. I think that'd be super great, but I don't know enough about it to fully support it, because I think that I've only really learned about it like the surface level of a carbon tax. But something like that would definitely be a valuable solution.
There definitely are a lot of problems with that too, because we can get a lot of flashback from people who maybe drive far and to go to work and don't have much money to spend on gas, and that's why we need to make public transportation so much more accessible to people, even for longer distances as well. Like, we shouldn't just have, I know that we only have a few lines here in Brattleboro for the buses, and they just go through Brattleboro and through West Brattleboro. We should do public transportation for longer commutes, like commutes to maybe Bennington or even just Putney, and on public transportation, so that people who work far away from where they live can get there without having to use their own cars.
And I also think that the declaration of climate emergency serves as a good wake-up for things like that. So because we're sucked into this idea that we're doing better than others, or that Brattleboro is this insanely progressive liberal town, and it's kind of also sucking us into this sense of security. And I think having a declaration of climate emergency to say, actually, there's so much more that we need to be doing, and there's so much more that we need to be looking at, is so important. Because even though on its own the declaration doesn't actually, it does a few things like require select board to call meetings, but it doesn't cost the town any money, but it serves as a wake-up call. I think it's invaluable. It's something that we need. right now.
And educating the public at large
Yeah.
in what is, because some people don't have that clear. Oh, it will happen in 50 years. I
Yeah.
won't be alive by then. But it's happening right now.
Yeah, and
So-
it advertises to other towns how we feel, and I think that a lot of other surrounding towns see Brattleboro as kind of a role model in our political actions, and it can show those other towns that we're doing something, or we really believe that this is an emergency, and we're doing something to try to act on that, and they might think about acting on that as well and start to be more involved in acting against climate crisis.
And then climate change is also affecting the lives of people in other countries that they are leaving their cities and towns and villages for a change. We see that at the border, as
Right.
I understand. So
Right.
you have any thoughts about that, connecting climate change with what happened in some Central American countries in which there is drought in
We have actually a section about that in the Declaration. It says, whereas we must feel immeasurable obligation and compassion for youth and people in frontline communities in the U.S. and around the world whose cultures are being decimated by the fossil fuel industry. Because I think even though we think of climate change as something that only affects maybe certain people, or that whose effects are very concentrated in certain areas, it's spread out and it's complicated, and one change in one part of the world can lead to changes in other parts of the world. It affects California, we've had droughts in South America. We destabilize whole countries for the sake of fossil fuels, which both lead to further decimation or hurt to the sources they rely on, as well as destruction of their governments. And so I think even if you don't believe in climate change, even if you don't think it's important, it affects so many aspects of the world that if you deal with it, you're not just dealing with climate change. And so I think that's really important for the town to remember. When they're dealing with climate change, they're not just dealing with climate change. They're dealing with so many different issues that we have in the town. And it's
And in the country,
in the
and all
country,
over the world. Climate change affects every single issue there is. It's, as you were just mentioning, the border crisis. Right now, people are being forced to move from their homes because of droughts and fires and floods because of climate crisis, and so they're pushed to move to other countries and they're not being let in. And this is a way that we can also act against climate crisis, is give them that accessibility and open up our country for them to live, because they were literally pushed away and literally had to move from their own homes.
and see if we can come with solutions to the crisis in their countries, because I understand that there is some countries in Central America in which their villages are devastated because they cannot produce any agricultural products because of the drought. So why not to also help them to see how can we manage to at least ameliorate their suffering, because not everybody can come here. There's a lot of that. So it's happening in Africa, all over, as we know, in Europe.
in Venezuela. Like, we complained about the refugees from Venezuela coming in, but we were part of the problem. The country destabilized Venezuela for the purpose of gaining oil. We're currently backing a political candidate because they support our interest in oil, and yet we claim that we're so separate from it. But climate change has to remind us that we are a global community and that we have to take responsibility for global issues.
And the United States, as just a very small fraction of the population of the whole entire world, is producing 15% of the global carbon emissions. And so we have a huge responsibility to to help other places, like as it says in the Declaration, people in frontline communities, so, like those people who are being destabilized from their own homes because of climate crisis. We have an obligation to them to give them homes and give them places to stay because we are part of the reason that they were pushed out of those homes.
And it's not as if we're under the impression that making Brattleboro a fully green place will solve climate change. It's about being a leader in it, and not just being a leader by being satisfied with where we are, being a leader by never being satisfied with where we are. We're currently in an emergency that hasn't been solved and isn't being treated like it.
And we need to take those steps forward to show to the other towns, show to the other countries that we need to make change, and by leading, just like what you said, and not being satisfied by where we are. That is a great example for making change all over the world. So if you want to read the Declaration of Climate Emergency, which will be voted on the next Brattleboro Select Board meeting at the Municipal Center, September 3rd at 6:15 p.m., you can go to Brattleboro, BRATTLEBORO, Common, COMMON, Sense, SENSE, .org, and you will find the whole text of the declaration on that website.
And if you're interested in supporting us trying to pass this declaration, you can come to the Municipal Building in Brattleboro to testify before the Select Board with us, or just come to support us on September 3rd. September 3rd at 6:15.
And if you would like to get more involved with Brattleboro Common Sense's climate crisis movements, you can email info@brattleboroCommonSense.org.
Thank you.
Thank you.